And hello from the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We welcome you to today's SEI webcast, applying the principles of Agile to strengthen the federal cyber workforce. My name is Shane McGraw, Outreach Team Lead here at the Software Engineering Institute, and I'd like to thank you for attending. We want to make today as interactive as possible, so we will address questions and comments throughout today's talk and again at the end of the talk. And you can add those questions or comments in the YouTube chat area now. Our featured speaker today is Josh Hammerstein. Josh is the Research and Prototypes Technical Manager within our Cyber Workforce Development Directorate in the CERT division of the SEI. He leads a diverse team of researchers and engineers on projects that focus on improving the readiness and capability of cybersecurity professionals in the federal government. This team has been working with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security on the President's Cup since its inception in 2019. Josh has also served as an adjunct faculty at Carnegie Mellon University, teaching graduate level courses in cyber forensic and incident response. Josh, thanks for joining me today. All yours.
Thanks, Shane. As you mentioned, I'm a technical manager here at the Software Engineering Institute, and I'm going to talk today about applying principles of Agile to strengthen the federal cyber workforce. I'll go through a brief introduction before we get into the main part of today's topic. We're going to talk about the cybersecurity workforce shortage. It's important for us to understand the problem that we're trying to address. I'll go over a brief background on Agile development, and then we'll talk about various concepts of Agile development that can be used to apply to strengthening the cybersecurity workforce. As you had mentioned, the Software Engineering Institute is a part of Carnegie Mellon, which consistently ranks as one of the top universities in the country. Very strong programs all around, but particularly in the areas of computer engineering, computer science, and software engineering. And then the Software Engineering Institute, the SEI, is what's known as a FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center. And it was founded in 1984, and we're sponsored by the Department of Defense. And the SEI consists of 3 divisions that focus on software engineering, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. The CERT division was founded in 1988 in response to the Morris worm. And the CERT division we focus on all aspects of cybersecurity, so research and development in cybersecurity. And then the Cyber Workforce Development Directorate. So there's a number of directorates within the CERT division, and I work in CWD. Our mission is to grow the cybersecurity workforce while at the same time enhancing operational readiness of those who are currently in the workforce. And we do this by dealing with problems of time, scale, and cost. So how can we reduce the amount of time it takes to acquire knowledge and skill? Developing and building out technologies and capabilities for scaling out solutions to a globally distributed workforce, and doing so in a manner that reduces costs for the government. So the cybersecurity workforce shortage, it's important for us to understand the problem that we're facing before we get into the main portion of today's talk. These numbers come from cyberseek.org, which is a partnership with the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. And it's to provide job market data about the cybersecurity workforce. So quite simply, there are not enough qualified cybersecurity professionals to meet current demand. Right now, by current estimates, there are about 715,000 unfilled job openings nationwide. Now, that's across public and private sector. If we look at public sector alone, there's about 39,000 unfilled openings, which compared to 700,000 may not seem as bad, but when you consider the fact that there's about 69,000 currently filled positions, cybersecurity positions in public sector, it doesn't look so good. This workforce shortage can be further broken down into three problem areas: the cybersecurity workforce pipeline, capacity building, and recruitment and retention. And we'll take a look at those right now. So the cybersecurity workforce pipeline, quite simply, we need more entrants into the cybersecurity field. What we're looking at here are numbers from the 2021 Talby survey, which is an annual survey that's conducted by the Computer Research Association. And these numbers are by degrees awarded by gender, particularly females. And we can see that the numbers are broken down by degrees in computer science, computer engineering, and information systems. And what's reflected in these numbers is a problem that's been well documented and known for some time. And that's the fact that women are significantly underrepresented in these fields. So when we're talking about an issue like the cybersecurity workforce shortage, women make up 50% of our population, yet they only represent about 20 to 25% of the field. So that's a big problem. And this is an area where we can make significant progress by tackling this one single problem alone. So we need to do better in this area. And in fact, we can do better. So what we're looking at now are enrollment numbers for Carnegie Mellon University's undergraduate computer science program. And if we start off on the left, we can see the numbers from 2010 and the enrollment data. The male to female ratio pretty much matches what we were seeing in the Talby survey. But then as we look over time, just in a matter of 7 or 8 years, as the university began to institute changes to encourage greater female enrollment, you get to a point by 2017 and 2018 where they were able to shrink that gap to make that ratio to be just about even. So this is a solvable problem. And one thing that's interesting to note about this is that all the changes that the university instituted were cultural changes. This had nothing to do with curriculum. Moving on, looking at some other numbers, degrees awarded by ethnicity. The reason why we're looking at this is that because most federal jobs require U.S. citizenship. So if we look at the numbers on the column on the left, non-resident aliens, and these numbers are an aggregation of the degrees that are surveyed by the Talby survey. So computer science, computer engineering, information systems. We can see that recipients with advanced degrees, PhDs and masters are the majority of them are ineligible for federal employment. And so again, this is problematic. So when we look at the pipeline issue, we not only need to increase the number of entrants that are coming into the cybersecurity field, but when we're trying to shrink this gap for the federal workforce, we need to increase the number of individuals in the pipeline that are eligible for federal employment. Okay, capacity building. So as the pipeline grows, we need to expand the ability to educate and train new entrants into the field. And fortunately, this is an area where some progress is being made, and we need this ability both at the education level, so K through 12, but we also need the ability to train and reskill individuals who are currently in the workforce. So on the education front, a couple programs that are worth noting: the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency sponsors a program called CETAP, and it's the Cybersecurity Education and Training Assistance Program. And this particular program provides cybersecurity curriculum and resources to educators. Another notable program is the Cyber Patriots cybersecurity competition. This is a program that's sponsored by the Air Force Association, and it's open to middle and high school students. This particular program is notable because it actually deals with a couple of the problem areas with the cybersecurity workforce shortage. So one, on the capacity building front, because the participants in the competition go through quite a bit of coaching and preparation to get ready for the competition. But it also addresses the pipeline issue by exposing middle and high school students to the cybersecurity career field. On the reskilling front, one really notable program to point out comes from the Air Force, the Air Force Mission Defense Teams. This was an initiative from the Air Force to train and develop communication squadrons and then redesignate them to serve a cyber mission. So, clearly progress is being made in this area, but as the pipeline grows, we're going to need to expand this capacity, our ability to train and educate those who are going to be entering the cybersecurity career field. Okay, recruitment and retention. So what we're looking at here is this is from the Talby survey again, employment data for new PhD recipients. And again, these are for in the areas of computer science, computer engineering, information systems. So we got about 1,250 new PhD recipients in 2021. And 72 of those went into the cybersecurity field, which is roughly about 6%. So we need to increase those numbers. Then if you look at the column on the left, this is for individuals who chose a career in cybersecurity. Out of 72 of those PhD recipients, only one chose a career in government. Only one. So as we look to tackle this problem, particularly with strengthening the federal cyber workforce, we need to attract more talent into the federal workforce, and we need to encourage individuals to stay in federal service longer. One really notable program to point out is the National Science Foundation Scholarship for Services program. It received about $63 million in funding in fiscal year 22. And the way that this program works is that students enrolled in a cybersecurity degree program at a qualified institution are eligible to receive a scholarship. And this scholarship will pay for their tuition. And the only thing they have to do is, in return, they pay that scholarship back, not through money, but through time in service in the government. And this program is effective. I myself am a recipient of this scholarship program. When I got my master's in 2005, I received an SFS scholarship, and I went into government service. I worked for the Government Accountability Office. And that experience inspired me to continue working with the government, now working at a federal lab for the past 15 years. However, this program only puts through about 275 students a year, give or take, depending on the year. And so if we think about that problem, that number, 39,000 unfilled openings in the public sector, programs like these are going to need to be significantly expanded in order for us to make some headway in shrinking that gap. I should also note that the Department of Defense has a similar program called the Cyber Scholarship Program, where, again, tuition is paid for in return for service in the Department of Defense. With that, Shane, I'll pause. Do we have any questions?
No particular questions from the audience, Josh. One I wanted to work in is just, you mentioned job shortages. the SEI is like everywhere else. There's a war on for talent. Like what openings do we currently have here, Josh, within CWD, and maybe a little background on that?
Yeah, so we have a number of job openings in the Cyber Workforce Development Directorate. There's one for my team, and then I know there's other teams that are hiring as well. And we're seeing we're dealing with the same issues that others are facing in the government, in industry, with regards to hiring cybersecurity talent. It's tough right now. Because as the slides indicate, there's just not enough professionals to meet the demand. So we talked about the cybersecurity workforce shortage, the pipeline problem, capacity building, recruitment and retention. Around recruitment and retention, one program that I wanted to talk about specifically is the President's Cup cybersecurity competition. So in May of 2019, the president signed Executive Order 13870, titled America's Cybersecurity Workforce. And in this executive order, it called for the establishment of the President's Cup cybersecurity program for cybersecurity competition for the purposes of identifying and rewarding top cybersecurity talent in the federal government. And it called for the inaugural competition to be held no later than December 31st, 2019. So the executive order was signed in May 2019, and the competition had to be held in December of 2019. That's not a lot of time at all to be standing up a new program. And so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the agency that was tasked with standing up this program, they approached us because of our experience with developing cybersecurity training and readiness programs for the government, particularly with the Department of Defense, and asked if we would be interested in helping them support this competition. And so obviously we said yes. One, it's a tremendous opportunity, and two, we're always up for a challenge. We already had some of the tools and capabilities from the other programs that we support within the government, specifically tools to develop and create cybersecurity challenges for the competition. But one thing that we did not have is we didn't have a platform for the competition itself, something that participants could register, log into, go through cybersecurity challenges, have them graded, and then receive a score that gets displayed to a scoreboard. And so that was going to be a new development effort. And so as it turns out, something called the President's Cup has high visibility. And there were actually a number of plans and approvals that needed to happen before we could begin work for the inaugural competition. And in fact, one of those approvals had to come from the National Security Council. And so by the time all those approvals came into place, we actually only had 6 weeks from the start of when we could begin development on the competition platform to when registration opened up to federal employees. And so we had to do Agile in the absolute extreme. 6 weeks is no time for standing up a new platform. And there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into that effort. But I'm proud to say that the 2019 President's Cup was a big success, and we're going on our 4th year supporting CISA with the competition. That experience of developing the competition platform in such a short period of time was really eye-opening, and really got me thinking about the power of Agile development and how could it be used to address other problems such as the cybersecurity workforce shortage. And that experience is what inspired this topic. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So before we begin, it's important that we provide a definition of agile development, particularly for those who may not be familiar with it. I have to give credit here to Lindsay Hughes and David Sweeney. They gave a SEI webcast over the summer on Agile and DevSecOps. And this definition is from their presentation. It was so good that I included it in mine. So Agile software development is an iterative and incremental approach to software development, which is performed in a highly collaborative and evolving manner by self-organizing teams within an effective governance framework with just enough ceremony that produces high-quality solutions in a cost-effective and timely manner, which meets the changing needs of its stakeholders. So, now we know the what is Agile? How about the why? Why Agile for cyber workforce development? Well, first of all, Agile can be used beyond software development. It really provides a process for getting work done. In his book, Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, the author Jeff Sutherland talks about how he used Scrum, which is one type of agile development. It's one agile development methodology. He used Scrum to ensure that a home renovation project that he was overseeing with a bunch of contractors and subcontractors was completed on time and on budget, which, for anybody who has, dealt with home renovation knows that that's quite an accomplishment. There's several aspects to the cybersecurity workforce shortage that make it conducive to Agile. First, the problem is large and complex. And Agile development is used to build out large and complex systems. And it does this by breaking them down into smaller, more manageable components that then get built out over time and through an iterative process. Second, the cybersecurity domain is constantly changing and evolving. And so in order for us to make some real progress in shrinking this gap in the cyber workforce, we're going to need solutions and processes that are flexible and adaptable. And I mean, it's in the name itself, Agile. And then third, there's no clear solution for how we close this gap with the workforce shortage. And Agile is really good about dealing with this kind of uncertainty. Whether it's a software development project or you're developing a program, a cybersecurity workforce development program, or any other kind of project, things are going to go wrong. You're going to encounter failure. And Agile really recognizes this and embraces the fact that failure is going to happen on a project, no matter what. And because of this iterative process, this iterative development cycle, which we'll talk about in a couple slides, it really encourages you to encounter that failure sooner so that you can learn from it, address it, and then move on. So today we're going to talk, I'm going to talk about 6 concepts from Agile development and how they can be applied to the cybersecurity workforce shortage. The MVP, or the minimum viable product, iterative and incremental improvement, removing blockers, self-organizing teams, prioritized efforts, and working in highly collaborative environments. So the first concept, the minimum viable product. In agile development, there's this desire to deploy functional software as soon as you can. And the way that you do that is you implement a reduced feature set application. And then once you have that, you work incrementally to build out the fully complete software application until it's considered feature complete. So what's the point of doing this? What is the purpose of the MVP, as it's called? Well, one of the reasons is that by doing this, you provide value sooner. The software that you're developing is intended to serve some purpose, meet some business need. And it does no good if it's not in use. And so it's better to put a reduced feature set product out that at least provides some utility, rather than having a long development process and then waiting until the end of the project to release the software and put the product out into production. Additionally, this MVP allows you to incorporate and deal with change easier. And we'll talk about that more in subsequent slides, how you do that through Agile. And then finally, there's a lot to be learned through feedback. And you really only start getting feedback once you put software in the hands of the user. And so the sooner that you can deploy software and release it, the sooner you start getting feedback, and you can start incorporating it into subsequent iterations of development. So there's a really good example of this, real world example of this. In 2017, Tesla began selling its Model 3 car. And it began selling the cars without the ability to turn on the rear seat warmers. So it had rear seat warmers, you just couldn't turn it on in the car. And the reason why the company did this is that they understood that quite frankly, there was more value for them to begin selling their cars sooner and then push a software update 1 to 2 months down the road than to hold off selling the car, wait an additional 2 or 3 months before they begin selling the car, just to wait for this one feature to be implemented. And that's in fact what they did. After about a month or two of, when they began selling the car, they pushed an update and added the capability to turn on the rear seat warmers. So the same concept of an MVP can be applied to standing up a cyber workforce program. Similar to with your software, wanting to deploy it sooner, don't wait for a program to be kind of quote unquote feature complete before standing up. You're going to need to take some time in the beginning to lay out some goals, understand what are your objectives for the program, what are you trying to accomplish, and how are you going to go about accomplishing that. But then once you do that, identify the minimal components of that program that are needed for that, if you stand it up sooner, for it to begin serving its purpose and serving some value. It may not be a fully complete program, and it may not be able to achieve all of the objectives that are laid out or that are desired for that program, but at least it will be able to accomplish some of them, and that's better than nothing. And then from there, once you have your program, your initial program built out, you could call it a pilot, then you build it out incrementally over time, and we'll talk more about that in the next slide. So what would this look like in the real world? Well, let's say we wanted to create a program to reskill federal employees into the cyber workforce. And so to stand up such a program, you would need two things. You would need content, and you need a platform. So on the content side, what you would do here is, instead of building out a large corpus of curriculum all at once, you start out by just building out 1 or 2 courses to begin with. And then on the platform side, similarly, You don't build out a fully feature complete platform delivering training. In the end, you're going to want training that delivers knowledge-based content, and also, if you're talking about reskilling, hands-on, skill-based content. But I can tell you from personal experience, it is much more time and resource intensive to develop hands-on content, and then not to mention the technical capability to do that within a platform. It's going to be significantly more complicated and take a lot more time. So start smaller, start simpler, just offer knowledge-based content to begin with, and then you can start working towards a more feature complete platform in the future. So once you have your MVP, the next step is this concept of iterative and incremental improvement, and this idea really goes hand in hand with the MVP. And once you've stood up your MVP, your minimum viable product, then from there you build out the software incrementally over time. And the idea is that you work in short, iterative development cycles that usually range between 2 to 4 weeks in time. And in that development cycle, you're developing functional components of the software, with the idea that once you're done, after 2 weeks time or 4 weeks time, once you're done, you push that new feature into production. And you do that for the same reasons why you deploy an MVP in the beginning, because it's more valuable and more useful to get functional software out quicker. You just, with agile development, you just do that in shorter development cycles. And similar to the MVP, this iterative development allows you to incorporate feedback as part of the development process. Feedback is very important to agile development. Because you're working in shorter development cycles, as you start to receive feedback, you incorporate it into the development cycle. And so what ends up happening is you don't just build out a software or a system, component by component over time, but it actually becomes better over time because you're improving it through feedback. In addition, working in these incremental cycles allows you to adapt to change better. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about prioritized efforts, about how incorporating change into the development process occurs. Okay, so how does this apply? How do we apply this to the cybersecurity workforce problem? Well, similarly to with a software application, we talked about how we stood up a pilot for reskilling federal employees. And so that pilot, allows you to test out an initial capability. And then from there, you begin to build out the program over time. So as I had talked about previously, you start adding more content until you reach a point that you reach your objective for all of the training and content that you want in this platform and to be served in this program. And then along those same lines, we talked about starting out with a more simple knowledge-based training capability. And then incrementally over time, you start to build out more advanced training, hands-on experiential learning. And, by going through this incremental implementation of this cyber reskilling program, it makes it easier to, adapt and encounter failure, because, as you initially stand it up, things are going to go wrong. And so by working in these shorter development cycles for standing up this program, you get to work out the kinks incrementally and make sure that it improves over time. Finally, a really important aspect to any program that's going to be aimed at shrinking the cybersecurity workforce gap, we need to collect metrics, because metrics they're a form of feedback, and feedback is incredibly important in agile development. So collecting metrics on things like curriculum effectiveness, platform utilization. And again, because you're working in these shorter development cycles, as you start to get information and data about the platform, how it's being used, and whether the content itself is effective, you can make changes, you can adapt, and so you can improve those over time. Shane, I just want to pause real quick. Are there any questions?
Nothing in there yet, Josh. We can continue on to the next part. But just to remind everybody, any questions or comments out there, please feel free to add them to the YouTube chat area now.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, removing blockers. A number of years ago, I was in a Scrum Master certification class, and the instructor took the class through an exercise to hammer home this point of removing blockers in order to increase effectiveness for teams. And what he did was he paired everybody up into a team, and he had outlined an obstacle course in the carpet with masking tape and put various barriers, chairs, and other objects, scattered throughout this course. One person who would represent a developer on a project was standing inside of the obstacle course, and then the other person on the team represented the Scrum Master, which is kind of like the project manager in Scrum, and they were standing on the outside. And the goal for the team was to generate as many steps as they could in a minute. And so the job of the engineer was to walk around, and the job of the Scrum Master was to provide direction on where to go. And so we went through this first iteration of the exercise. Everybody kind of wrote down how many steps that they generated. And then the instructor said, okay, now we're going to change things up. We're going to run through the same thing, but now all of the Scrum Masters, those of you who are, the Scrum Masters, you can't provide direction to your teammates, but you can do anything else to help them out. And so we started the exercise again. And this time, because everybody who was standing outside of the course, they were the Scrum Masters, because they weren't so hyper focused on providing direction to their teammates and telling them where to go, they had greater awareness of the situation that was going on. And they could see their teammates were kind of struggling to navigate the course. They were running into other people. There was other objects in the way around the course. And then all of a sudden, everybody who was serving as the Scrum Master in this exercise, kind of a light bulb goes off for everybody all at once. And they all everyone who's a Scrum Master starts swarming, onto this obstacle course, and they start moving chairs and barriers out of the way and freeing up their teammates to move more freely throughout this course and generate more steps in the exercise. And so this is a principle that's very applicable to dealing with the cybersecurity workforce shortage. There are going to be many barriers to strengthening the federal cyber workforce that are going to need to be dealt with. When we think about the problem area of recruitment and retention, there's issues around competitive pay. So how do we encourage more people to enter federal employment? And likewise, how do we entice them to stay longer, particularly when they can go to private industry and make significantly more money? There's issues around hiring requirements. I was actually talking with somebody on the National Cyber Director's staff about this a few months ago, but there are inflexibilities with federal hiring requirements where hiring managers may encounter candidates who are capable and qualified for the jobs that they are applying for. They can do the job, but they just may lack a degree, and that excludes them from being hired into that particular position. So in order for us to deal with these kinds of barriers, particularly with the federal government, we need to designate somebody or some organization to deal with these blockers. And ideally, it would be someone or some organization with some elevated authorities. Because one, we need them to be able to cut through the bureaucratic red tape. And in the federal government, I've worked in the government, I work with the government. I love, working with the government. I love my time in the government. I wouldn't choose it any other way, but there's a lot of red tape. So one, we need somebody that will help folks navigate through that red tape. The other reason why we want to designate some central authority to do this is that the more time the doers spend on trying to overcome these barriers, the less time they're spending on trying to actually solve the problems itself. Okay, self-organizing teams. So in agile development, teams are empowered, and this enables them to work effectively and more efficiently. What do I mean by this? So in agile, the engineers and developers, they decide on how to complete the work. Now, this doesn't mean that the work is done in a complete ad hoc manner. There's actually quite a bit of planning that goes into agile development. Before each development cycle, the team goes through quite a bit of planning. But once all the tasking has been identified and planned out, it's really up to the developers to decide how they're going to go about completing that work. And the reason why is that, quite frankly, those who are doing the work, they best understand how to complete it. And so this same principle is applicable to cyber workforce development. We need to empower those who are closest to the problem. Those who are closest to the problem are going to have a best understanding of the various intricacies and details with that particular problem. They're going to have ideas on root causes, better visibility into blockers and challenges for solving the problem, and they're going to have good ideas for actual solutions themselves. In addition to that, we need to allow for flexible execution. And what do I mean by that? In the government, and to be fair, this is not exclusive to the government. This can happen in any kind of organization. But in the government, it's not uncommon for a program or initiative to be mandated from some higher authority. And usually this higher authority is just by nature further removed from the problem that it's intending to solve. So when this occurs, we need to make sure that we provide goals and guidance for addressing the problem. What are the objectives? What is this program intending to accomplish? But we should allow those who are tasked with implementing and standing up these mandated programs, we should allow them broad freedom to implement the programs as they best see fit. Because again, those who are closest to the problem, are going to have a better understanding of it. Third, and this may be a little bit of a controversial statement as we're talking about government. we need to allow for duplication of effort. Now, government is very, very focused on efficiency and streamlining efforts, and for good reason. But, quite frankly, we are facing a problem here that is a matter of national security. Think about those numbers again. 715,000 unfilled job openings nationwide, 39,000 in the public sector. So we don't have the luxury to see how various initiatives are going to pan out. We need to be okay with standing up programs and initiatives that may be duplicative in nature. We've got to address and attack this problem aggressively. And then once we start making some significant progress in filling those cybersecurity positions and shrinking that gap, then we can start thinking about efficiency and streamlined efforts. Prioritized effort. So in agile development, there's this concept that you want to deliver more value up front. And the way you do this is that you assign value to various components and features of a system. And these are basically associated by what's most important to your customer. So by the nature of that, you recognize that there are certain features that are more valuable than others. And by nature, those should be prioritized. And so when we think about the concept of the MVP, you're prioritizing the most valuable features first, and that's what enables you to deliver a product that has some utility in the beginning. And through this incremental development process, the other thing about prioritizing effort is that it allows you to better account for and adapt to change, because you're not just prioritizing value in the beginning when you initially plan out the system or the software application. You're doing this throughout the project for every single iterative development cycle. And we know that as we talked about the cyber landscape, the cyber environment, it's constantly changing and evolving. Priorities change over time. Business needs change over time. There's a term in traditional software development methodologies and project management called scope creep. And the idea is that any new tasks or features that are requested or come up after all of the planning has occurred is approached with extreme caution, because it's considered out of scope for the project, and it can throw the project off schedule and off budget. And it's well-intentioned, but it doesn't reflect reality. And the reality is that things change over time, priorities change over time. And so by working in these shorter incremental development cycles, you're periodically reassessing priority. And so if a new feature is requested from the customer that wasn't originally identified when the initial planning occurred, it's no big deal. If that's a high priority feature, you bump it up, you move it into your current increments, your current sprint, as it's called in Scrum, and then you take a piece of work that's of equivalent effort, and then you simply drop it out. So you still account for time, but now you're just focusing on the value, delivering the most value that you can with each development cycle that you go through. And so the same concept is very applicable to dealing with the cybersecurity workforce shortage. We need to focus on high impact initiatives first. So we think back to the pipeline problem that we were talking about, and we saw that women are significantly underrepresented in the cybersecurity field. They represent about 20 to 25% rough estimates when they represent 50% of our population. So this is a problem where we could make significant progress on the overall cybersecurity workforce issue if we just deal with that one problem alone. So, that is a very high impact, and as a result, high impact initiative, and as a result, should be highly prioritized. In addition, we want to focus on efforts where we can have immediate impact. And what this means is, in the short term, focusing on efforts that are within one's locus of control. So where we have control over resources, manpower, budget, authority, where we can affect immediate change. There are going to be other issues that are equally, possibly even more important, that are going to require external intervention or are going to be outside of one's locus of control. And we need to designate those as more mid and long-term goals. One really good example of this is the Scholarship for Services program that I discussed earlier. It's a really great program for bringing talent into the federal workforce. But expanding a program like that is going to require an increase in funding. It's literally going to require an act in Congress to expand that program, an act of Congress to expand that program. So that's going to take some time. So focus on the efforts where we can affect and have immediate change quickly. Lastly, working in highly collaborative environments. So in Agile development, every day the team gets together and they have a meeting called Daily Stand-Up. And the team everybody goes around and answers three questions. What did you work on yesterday? What are you working on today? Do you have any blockers? And by doing so, by having this greater awareness across the team, it leads to more efficient work and more timely resolution of problems. And this is obviously very applicable to dealing with the cybersecurity workforce shortage. This is a problem that's going to require collaboration across many different stakeholders and many different sectors. So, across the federal government, it's also going to include state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, collaboration with private industry and with academia. And this is an area where greater awareness is going to be a good thing because it's a multifaceted, large, and complex problem. I will caveat that with, we need to make sure that we are not overly prescriptive in trying to enforce coordination. The federal government and all government loves coordination. And we just need to make sure that we don't hinder progress by trying to enforce too much coordination in the beginning. So just to conclude, this is my quick 6 tips for applying Agile to the cybersecurity workforce. And
can we work in one question
Yeah,
before you wrap up, Josh?
absolutely.
Gary had asked a question. Can part of the duplication of effort include standing up multiple independent efforts across many departments or organizations and seeing which ones bear fruit?
So that was Gary?
Yeah.
Gary, that's actually exactly what I'm talking about. I think that's really important. We can't be concerned about, efficiency, about, well, who is leading this, this particular effort. If it means standing up independent efforts across various departments and agencies that do the same thing, I think that's exactly what I meant. And seeing which one bears fruit, that's how we deal with this problem. We need to allow things like that. Thanks, Shane.
Yep.
Okay, so getting back to this, my quick 6 tips for applying Agile to the cybersecurity workforce shortage. So, 1, we stand up workforce programs quickly. We accept that change is going to be needed. We're not going to be able to institute a perfect program or a complete program in the same time. I should say that shouldn't be our focus of doing that. 2, we build out programs incrementally. We gather feedback, adapt, and improve. 3, designate a central authority to remove blockers. 4, empower those who are closest to the problem. 5, focus on high impact initiatives. And then 6, we want to facilitate productive collaboration. And with that concludes my presentation. Shane, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to field those.
No current questions, so I'll just go on to a little wrap up because I know we're within being wrapped up at 5 minutes. So I'll do that, and then we'll look to see if there's any more questions for you, Josh. But first of all, just thank you for a great discussion. They really appreciate you sharing your expertise on such an important topic.
Thank you.
And last, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Upon exiting, please hit the like button below and share the archive if you found value today. Also, you can subscribe to the SEI YouTube channel by clicking on the SEI seal in the lower right corner of the video window. And lastly, you can join us for our next live stream, which will be November 2nd. And the topic will be Infrastructure as Code through Ansible by Matthew Heckathorn. Registration information is available on our website now and will be emailed out as well. And any questions from today's event, you can send to info@sei.cmu.edu. So no further questions, Josh. Gary just said thanks for addressing his question. And again, thanks everyone for attending today. We really appreciate your time, and we'll look for you at our next event.